You know, the Muslims, they talk about the Hadith. You know, without the Hadith, Islam collapses. Absolutely collapses. Partly because of this, not just because without the Hadith, you have very little to go on about Muhammad. And by the way, you have very little to go on about Muhammad. You have the Sirah, you have these biographies. But they generally, that approach to knowing about Muhammad is largely rejected by Muslims. Because it's, well, the biographies give kind of stuff, have information in them which Muslims don't really like. So they rely on the Hadith. And in fact, they're so dependent on the Hadith, one doesn't think about this, but without the Hadith, the Quran cannot be upheld as the central book of their religion. Because to know where the Quran comes from, you have to have the Hadith. Without the Hadith, the Quran could come from anywhere and be sourced from anyone. Now Muslims tell you they're scholars. Their scholars say the Hadith validate their religion, and they've got this science of Hadith. And I always say, you know, and this might be regarded as imperialist, racist, culturally prejudiced, I couldn't care less. I don't believe in anything but the Western approach to academic analysis. And we have, in the West, Hadith specialists. And it's their opinion that matters to me. Not the opinion of so-called 8th, 9th, 10th century Islamic Hadith scientists, or even sheikhs from Saudi Arabia who've just got an agenda to support. So I've got here copies, because the book is too big to bring, the Wiley-Blackwell Concise Companion to Hadith. Wiley-Blackwell is a very, very prestigious publishing house. So you know you're getting the best of Western academic thought on a subject when you got one of their one of their books, one of their compendiums. So I thought I'd read what they say about Hadith. This is a scholarly academic, Daniel W. Brown. He's given a talk about the Western scholars, Motsky, Schurler, and Gurkha. Very well-respected scholars of a Hadith in the West. He says, given the sometimes forceful scholarly exchanges over the efficacy of isnad cum matan criticism, the isnad is the chain of narration and the matan is the content of the Hadith. What Motsky, Schurler and Gurkha concede is worth noting. So what these guys concede is what is going to be spoken of now. They do not dispute, for example, the meagreness of the positive results. You see, what those guys are doing, Motsky, Schurler and Gurkha, they're trying to see how much information you can really get from looking at the Hadith. The Muslims say you can get a ton of stuff. It's totally reliable. But these Western academics, they're fighting and arguing over how you should analyse the Hadith, how far back they can go. But in their disputes amongst each other, they don't dispute the meagreness of what you can get, the actual small amount of information you can actually get from the Hadith. They rather argue the virtue of acknowledging how little we know with certainty. How little we know, despite all the efforts of analysing the Hadith of the Muslims really scientifically in a Western way. And he goes on, Brown goes on, and it turns out that there's a long list of findings of sceptical scholarship that Schurler at least accepts. And this is scholarship about the Hadith, just to repeat. Forgery and embellishments did take place on a large scale and at every stage of transmission of these hadiths, which were allegedly transmitted from person to person. The chronology of Muhammad's life is a late construction. So we can't really say But when all this stuff we have about his life, when he was born, and the sequence of events which led to him receiving the revelations, and what he did, and when he died, all this is a late construction. And he goes on, Brown goes on. Many traditions can be shown to be exegetically derived. So we're talking about traditions which are not based on any historical event. They're just derived from what the religion demands, the religious dogmatic teaching demands of Islam. And many traditions are unconnected with historical events. So we can't even say that hadith is telling you anything about something that actually happened. It goes on, Brown goes on. Isnads on their own are insufficient for dating traditions or identifying sources. Now the isnad, that's to repeat, is the chain of transmission in Islam. That chain of transmission, it says here, is not sufficient to say when the tradition happens, nor for telling us where that tradition came from. So that blows all the Muslims out of the water when they're saying the isnad is a brilliant means of telling us about early Islam. And he goes on to say, pre-Hijra events, that is prior to the migration to Mecca of Muhammad allegedly and his followers, pre-Hijra events are legendary. They're legendary, regardless of the reliability of their transmitter. So it doesn't matter which transmitter of hadith we're talking about. The pre-Hijra events are legends. They're like the flying horse or Valhalla. They're not real. All right. They're legendary, irrespective of the reliability of their transmitter, as are miracle stories. So we take Islamic miracle stories, forget them, legendary. And even credible reports should not be assumed to be early, because credibility is no proof of historicity. So even if the Muslims could even bring us a credible hadith, it doesn't mean it actually happened. It doesn't mean it describes something that happened. So that's just a flavour from the Blackwell, the Wiley Blackwell Concise Companion to Hadith. This is the best of Islam, because it's really telling us that the scholars of the West who look at the Hadith tradition have found very little that can be said to be true in that religion. And I won't bore you, because reading from a text is a drag. There's so much more, but that's just a compendium of articles about Islam written by mainstream Western scholarship. Even a favourable Muslim like Jonathan Brown, who's written a book, An Introduction to Hadith, says that 37% of Hadith are worthless, and these are the ones that are regarded as belonging in the sacred books of Islam. So if the chap had remained that I was talking to, we could have gone through this, because I showed, of course, that there's no historical basis for Islam, given that their teachings about Jesus are false. That means the whole book is false. But you could take this other approach from the Hadith to see it's false. So there we are.